there, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about John Huston's adaptation of Moby Dick from the Melville novel. That was one of those unfilmable novels that you hear very so often someone's going to do a new version of, and they never do it. They do it on TV in a kind of, either lower budget thing where it's a bit longer. They put more incidents in the book, but it doesn't have the majesty of a movie. And there's even a film about the incident that led to Moby Dick as well, in Heart of the Sea a few years ago, which I have not seen. But this is the John Huston adaptation of Moby Dick, which is very underrated, I think. I've not read Moby Dick, but this film was apparently very loyal in its use of language from the book. And, the interesting thing when watching this film is you realise how much Afrikaans stole from Moby Dick. It's a lot. But the film is wonderful. The film is, you can tell it's an adaptation, it's paring things down, but it's done in a very respectful way. Ray Bradbury worked the script with Huston. Ray Bradbury apparently was not a biggest fan of Moby Dick, but he was a guy who was very good at flowery language and that kind of language, and I think the fantastical mixed with reality. So I think that's what Huston wanted, was someone who could mix the kind of bigger than life thing with the reality of life too. So, mixing something very theatrical with something that people can identify with, like human emotions. Ray Bradbury is not about reality, but I was trying to get at that before. So they made the script, and the film was produced, during Huston's 50s era. Now, Huston's one of those directors who has a varied career. It's not a comfortable career. It's kind of like Robert Altman. He's like the Robert Altman of his day, in a sense of he could go from being a genius to being a complete idiot in one film to the next. He can go from, if you remember Robert Altman, he went from Shortcuts to Pret-a-Porter, from one of his best films to one of his worst films. Huston was capable of the same thing. Huston could go from something wonderful to something awful. He's done complete trash, and he's done some wonderful things. And each decade you can look at it and see, that's good, that's terrible, that's good, that's terrible. It's like, I think he's the director who get bored with his own film sometimes. If a film wasn't really working, he would just phone it in. And so you get films where there've been lots of arguments, so the film would end up being like a hodgepodge. There's a film called Macintosh Man in the 70s, apparently was that, where everyone had a different opinion what it should be. There's other films, like Kremlin, which I've covered before, which is an interesting film let down by a miscast leading man. And there's stuff like the Bible, which I enjoyed, which is very overproduced. He's done classics like Treasure of Sarah Madra, Maltese Falcon. He did pieces on her later in his career where it was wonderful and very droll. He also did Escape to Victory, which is wonderful in a kind of trashy way. He did Annie, the film Annie, and it's which is very untypical of Huston. He did tons of stuff, and there were just the quality controls all over the place. But Moby Dick was one of those films that I really like. The 50s. He also did Red Badge of Courage, which is also a film I really like, which is very kind of dreamlike. It was hacked about by the studio. So he's a director that has passions, but the passions can go wayward. In the 70s, he did Fat City and Wise Blood, but also did complete trash as well. So it's just a strange career. So Moby Dick is a faithful adaptation to a degree of a book I've not read. But it's reputed to be a faithful adaptation. I can just go by the film. The film is very enjoyable. Now, it was criticised at the time for casting Gregory Peck as Ahab. And Gregory Peck apparently wasn't very happy with Huston for a couple of reasons. One was he heard he wasn't the first choice there's other people who were first choice, but they couldn't get them. And so he was not the first choice. And also he felt some of the language was a bit flowery from the book that could have been like adapted a little bit more to normal. But that doesn't really matter because he actually is a very interesting Ahab. He's obsessive. And the flowery language makes the film work. The idea of the language as being complicated and difficult distinguishes the characters, and it shows you their inner journey in an interesting way that basic language can never really do. It's they're asking actors to actually up their game. So maybe the film was difficult for Peck, but actually I think he was actually very good in it because he plays Ahab with, instead of it being like all over the top all the time, obsessive, it's this thing of, it's almost like this biblical plague that's been placed on him. He has to kill this whale, and it's slowly ratcheting up as the story goes on, and slowly start to get to see the rationality of him, rather than being like he's a lunatic from the start. Why would you go on the boat with him? It's like he's a reputation of being a bit extreme, and he's going to go through hell, but he's a good commander. So for the first half of the film, it's you're with Ishmael, who's your lead character, who tells you the story, and he's going through it, and you're seeing the different characters on the boat. You've got the captain, then you've got the second command Starbuck, you've got all these different people with different opinions of what they're doing on the boat, and you get to know them, you get to know their strengths and weaknesses as they go through the difficult times, the good times, through whaling. And it's like what this industry actually was, which was a horrific industry killing whales for the oils and for the meat, so that you could actually power the country with oil, and you could use the whale meat, and it was an industry. But it's also the fact that there was this whale called Moby Dick. They've called Moby Dick this white whale that has tangled with various crews, and you're lucky to survive dealing with it. It's like, if it's Moby Dick, you just leave, go the other way if you're a whaler. It's that kind of thing. Just don't deal with this crazy creature. It's a creature with all these posts hanging out of it from various people trying to spear it, and it still hasn't worked. But Ahab has to kill his whale. He has to defeat it because it took his leg, and it's just created this fire within him that he has to destroy the whale. And it's a great slow burn of the whale. That's the basis of the story, but a lot of the story is about the whaling industry and the whaling. What happens to the industry communities? The community that Ahab comes from relies on the ship to bring in money, but for that, early on you go through the church, and there's all these memorials for different sailors who have lost their lives. It's like, this is a very perilous profession. There's a very good chance you will die if you're a whaler. So it's not easy. And you've got like Orson Welles as the preacher of the town, and he's like he's a pulpit that's made out of the front of a ship, and he's like very pro whaling and very kind of, into that kind of life, even though he can't do it himself. So it's a town that's based on one industry, and it's propulsion towards that industry. Everything's tied to that industry, and they're not going to. They're going to ignore all the problems to do what they're going to do. So it's an industry that's already obsessed before you get to Ahab. And Ahab's just at the point of the tip of the obsession. He's like the pure version of the obsession in this industry. And the hunt for this one whale is like the far end of the obsession, but they are obsessed. The whole community is obsessed. And Ishmael is an onlooker to this. He's come to this community, and he's just seen it as, this is interesting. And he's a guy who likes to travel, and he gets bored quickly. So he goes on this. He signs up to be a whaler, and him and this person he meets in the town who's Indian descent, and both of them go on the ship. Essentially, they become friends because this was going to ship. He goes on the ship too, and they end up getting sucked into this obsession. And his friends saying this will lead to death. Like, he's doing all these things with the bones and things to see the future. He says This is death. We're not going to survive. And he's already been told by someone before he leaves the ship that only one person in this crew will come back. So, good omens. But it's done quite nicely because it's like he's just used a mad person, but it's not overplayed. That's the thing about this film compared to other films that could have been directed a higher pitch. Nothing's overplayed. The guy who's saying it looks mad, and it's like, you're in through a bad time and you're probably drunk, and I'll just leave you to it. It's like if you saw him in the street, you just ignore him and go, what's the matter with you? It's not like the omens of doom. It's just like someone looks mad. And a lot of the people he sees, Ishmael sees in the bar when he first goes there, are the people who become the crew of the ship. And they've all got their various reasons of being, and some of them are very loyal to Ahab and to the idea of fishing to their detriment, and other ones like Starbuck who are like, no, this is wrong, something's going wrong here, we have to stop this. And it's about the kind of levels of what the crew in a ship can do and what they can't do to be the captain, what the captain can get away with, what the captain can't get away with, and then eventually the crew gets behind Ahab's obsession, even though it's leading them further and further into danger and away from profit, because they all want this white whale, and it becomes this sickness that develops with the crew. And Huston does all this great because he does not overplay it. He's always playing it as a human thing of, this leads to this, this leads to this, this leads to this, this leads to this. And he does this wonderful, he brings up the wonderful language of the story and of the book into the conversations, but he's also carefully adding to the idea of what the damage is to these people, just slowly but surely. So that's why Peck not being insane at the start really helps, because he builds to that rather than it just being a crazy person. And the idea of him and quieter makes the insanity worse, because it's like it started from someone sane who has gone insane, and it's a cold fury. Like, he's going to get this whale, and that's it. It's a cold fury that really makes it creepier. Now, there's a wonderful way to shoot it, which is very greyish, and it feels like the colour's been soaked out of it throughout, and it just works wonders because it allows the special effects, which are lots of like models and large scale bits of set that cover the whale when people are attacking the whale, but the actual greyness of the imagery helps hide the effects a lot quite well. I mean, it's still 50s effects, and you can tell sometimes they're models, but it works. It works within the fantasy of the story, and I enjoy the style of it. And just again, it adds to the sense of damnation. So anytime there's blue, which when you have a hot streak of getting lots of whales, the colour scheme is lighter before they go into the darkness of the final section. And a sense of dread with the way it's been shot without overstating the case. It's just like this is lives lived in darkness and in depression, and to have lots of colour would be inaccurate, and so whenever there's any colour it really pops. So it's just wonderful for the film to show the lives of the crew within that context, of the social context where they live, and how horrible it is to be a whaler. So this is a wonderful film, very underrated. I would recommend trying seeing the biggest screen as possible, because it is meant to be seen on the big screen. It's not meant for TV. It's really not. I think it'll lose so much in TV. I watched my projector just to get some of the scale, and it really delivered. So this is a high recommendation. You can catch it on Amazon. I got it on Amazon, the streaming service. I don't know if it's on Blu-ray or anything. I have no clue. I just got it where I could get it. So you can track it down. So hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you go see Moby Dick, because it's worth your time. It's only 2 hours, but it's 2 hours of really good filmmaking. Right, bye.